let's start with Section 7A, because we know what the impact of Section 7A was in other parts of the country, but we don't really know what the impact was here in particular industries, or, you know, when Section 7A was passed in the spring of '33.
Well, when you say it was passed, what preceded Section 7A was that the people who held political offices were scared of their shadows, and they were afraid to do anything that would alienate what I call the status quo people. And they would say off the record to you, now if there was a law passed and we had to obey the law, then we could do the things that had to be done, but we can't do them voluntarily.
You're talking employers.
That's right. Not only employers, politicians. Politicians who had to take a stand. In other words, if you talk to a politician at that time, would he tell you that he was in favor of equal rights and all equal opportunity and all the changes that were taking place? He would say, well, it has not been our custom, and this is a gradual thing. What was this that the Supreme Court said for a long time there about how fast they would move towards implementing what I call changes? It was
All deliberate speed.
All deliberate speed. Those are the words. Politicians were saying we're doing it with all deliberate speed, and I don't push it too fast. You know, and if you push it too fast, you might get it done this year instead of 50 years from now. And this was what was happening. So when it was passed, allegedly being rammed down their throats, but not really rammed down their throats, I think that those who had any real idea of what was happening recognized that the day had come. It was just a question of whether it would be today or next year or 3 years or 5 years. As far as employers is concerned, it also gave them an excuse. Not only gave them an excuse, but time and again, in just before it was passed, in labor board cases, we kept running into efforts by employers to set elections aside on the grounds that the union was coming in and was saying to the blacks, where they were the majority in a plant, join the union and we will see to it that you get the good paying jobs, and we will see to it that you get promotions. We'll see to it that you are not at the minimum wage, but in any job in the whole plant. And they, under the decisions of the labor board at that time, and a man by the name of Pinello was the one, I think, who advocated. He was on the 5-man board.
In this region or?
In the national board over this, which meant when it got appealed to them, they had the final say. And he was the one who kept saying that don't set elections aside based on promises made either by the employer or by the union. And he used as the example the fact that the union was making these wild promises they couldn't keep. And he was comparing that with the employer who would say, well, if the union comes in and I can't give them what they want and they strike, and then you go on strike, you lose your job because I don't have to put you back to work. And he kept pushing then not to have the board follow the policy that he was following of setting elections aside. And what was happening was that the employers were filing charges claiming that the union had come in and had advocated race hatred, and they even had, I think it was a case that involved the shoe workers in some oh, was it Tennessee or someplace not in the Atlanta, Georgia area, but in the southern area there, where they were promising them that if the union came in, that the blacks would be the officers, that they would see to it that there were blacks on the committee, that they would get the jobs that they were entitled to. And in one case, they accused the employer of being racist, anti-black, anti-Negro, and for that reason they ought to organize. And I remember they filed it. If I'm not mistaken, it was Constantia's office too, and they filed it on on grounds they were promoting race hatred. And instead of advocating trade unionism, that what they were doing was they were promoting race hatred, and by doing that, it was contrary to the National Labor Relations Act intent of promoting collective bargaining. If anything, it would do the reverse. It would not promote collective bargaining. And that became fairly popular, by the way, just before Title VII came in, for employers to seek to set aside the elections on the grounds that union organizers were promising things that dealt with racist matters and that a racist campaign would not permit a fair election. You see, the board said that our elections are where everybody exercises their free will and everybody does it on the basis of what is proper or correct in the economic field. And here you go promising things on the basis of race and accusing the employer of being a racist would make the people who were black there vote against the employer and for the union, which is not the proper atmosphere for it. And that was when you Title VII first started coming in.
I'm a bit confused by the chronology, because didn't
Yeah.
Title 7A or Section 7A of the NRA or NIRA come in before the NLRA?
Mm-mm. National Labor Relations Act has been in effect since '35.
Right, and I was thinking of the NRA, that the National Industrial Recovery Act of the New Deal of '33, Section 7A giving workers the right to organize.
Yeah, but you're talking about one Section 7, I'm talking about
Okay.
Title 7
Of the EEO.
of EEOC.
EEOC. Okay.
That's what I've been talking
Yeah,
about.
right,
You're
okay.
talking about Section 7.
7A.
That's a different one. That goes all the way back to '35. I was looking up closer than you were.
Yeah. Okay,
You see,
I'm going back.
You going back further than
Let's
I was
go
going.
Section 7A.
We'll go back to Section 7A. You said Title 7,
Okay, I'm sorry.
but Section 7A is different. Section 7A, of course, was the basis of having elections where they could turn around and vote for a union and have a union to represent them. And in doing that, as you and I know, the unions surrendered the right of trade unions to have a contract for union members only. There was a time when we drew contracts. This is before the NLRA bit came along, where we turned around and we agreed with an employer that we represented our members. We didn't represent anybody else in the shop. And that's a completely different thing. When the National Labor Relations Act came along, in order to represent everybody on collective bargaining and in order to represent everybody in the plant or within that unit, because that was not always in the plant, unions then agreed that we would represent non-union people too. And I'm not sure after all these years whether that was a smart thing. And you know why I'm not sure? Because they put 14B in. And 14B in the right to work states means that you are continually fighting to maintain your membership. And in the meantime, you're representing people in the plant who are anti-union, who will never join, and who hate your guts.
That was Taft-Hartley, or 14B is?
14B was at the beginning. Well, I say at the beginning, it came along with Taft-Hartley. You're correct, because at first we could have union shops because we had elections for union shops, closed shops. And if you remember, they said that originally the idea was that if you tried to persuade people who didn't want to belong to the union to have a union, that they would vote against the union. But every time they had these elections, why, by and large, we won them. Overwhelming amounts of them, until they finally did away with it. As you know, that came along with the Taft-Hartley, where they eliminated that portion of it. Just like a lot of people don't remember that at the beginning, supervisors also had unions and could belong. For example, in Elizabethton, Tennessee, we had a big North American rayon, American Bemberg plant, okay? Approximately 5,500 people. In addition to that, there was a clerical office staff, there were supervisors, secondary, going all the way up the line, and they formed a union that we had up there. And we had a local union for many, many, many years, until it was eliminated, when they turned around and eliminated secondary supervisors. And what they did was that they did it on the basis that these people actually owed their loyalty to management, because they were involved in the production and in the scheduling and in making sure that the rules of the shop were followed, and some of them were involved in the grievance procedure. And that was where we had made a mistake, I think, way back yonder in the trade union movement. Our grievance procedure, by and large, I say a mistake, it turned out to be a mistake. But when you set up a grievance procedure, how do you handle it? First step is with your immediate supervisor. He turns around and disciplines you, and so you take it up to the man just above him. You take it up to him, he usually backs up his foreman, because he's the next rung of it. You're not satisfied. You kick it up. Who do you kick it up to? It can, if it's a great big plant, it can be the plant supervisor. And after the plant supervisor, it can be the personnel department. After you hit that, you haven't settled it, you go to arbitration. Those are your 3-4 steps that we had. The opponents of trade unions were saying these people actually represent management in the handling of grievances. And here we are letting them also belong to a union. They're going to be prejudiced. Same way the same thing that they used against policemen, you know. They're supposed to take care of the public. You let them have a policeman's union. When there's a strike, why they're going to side with the strikers. Oh, if they can't have a union, or you don't belong to a union, that makes it kosher. The logic falls away somewhere, because if you don't have one, that means you're neutral. But if you don't have one, it ought to mean you're against it. If you're not in it, then you're out of it. If you're out of it, then it means you're against it. So they figured they got to supervise that. And we lost a tremendous number. We had, let's see, that local, I'm trying to remember, 2206 was the number of that local. 2207 was 2613. 2613 and 2207. 2207 was the big maintenance and production local. 2613 was the clerical. And we lost them. And we lost some good people there. Even though their sympathy, when we had sit-downs later and we had some strikes later, they were sympathetic to us because of their experience with it. And I had one real funny experience in that situation. There was a man who was the president of the union, and he held some kind of a clerical job, which he did not use any kind of machine of any kind. And when we set up the classifications in there, we set up the different classifications that you could rise to and get increased wages. He was in there considerable time, went as far as he could go, and then you could swing off of going up this way in a department to go into another department and start going up. So he bid on a job where he was supposed to know how to type.
Okay.
When he went to talk to the personnel people, the personnel guy says, "Can you type?" Never typed in his life. We'd hunt, punch, you know. They turned him down and they moved a guy up who was not in the union. So he files a grievance. When he files a grievance, and it goes through the various steps, and at that time I was in charge of the textile thing, and I handled just about all the arbitrations that had any significance. So I go up there and see him take care of some of the business there, and he tells me about his grievance coming up and so on. I said, "Are you sure that's the only reason they turned you down?" He said, "That's the only thing I can remember because they talked to me so and so." I said, "Well, as you moved it up the line, what did they say?" Well, he said that was what they said, that I was not qualified because I couldn't type. Other than that, I appeared to be okay. I said, "Well, let's pull it down. Have we had the last meeting?" And they had this on a list of a number of them where they had the final meeting on it. I said, "Tie it down." So they do, and they tie it down, and that's it. Other than that, he's a good man, years of service, responsible, everything else. So we get together and we start talking. I said, "Look, we're going to set this damn thing for arbitration." I said, "I don't know what you know about typing or what you don't, but to me, it's just a matter of practice. Get one of those damn books that they use in school. And between now and the time that we take this thing up for arbitration, if you don't know how to hunt and punch without looking down there and can't do it, then you don't deserve the job." Sure enough, he does it. We go to the arbitration. We go through whatever it is, the procedures. We get to his. I say to the arbitrator, "Well, it appears to me that the only question involved is can he or can't he?" The company's, yeah. I said, "Well, did you ever give him a chance?" "No." We talked to him. He said that he could hunt and punch. I said, "Yeah, but did you sit him down?" "No." So I said to the arbitrator, if they give him a typewriter and sit him down and give him something to do like he's supposed to, and he does it, he ought to get it. And the company's saying, "Yeah." Shall I tell you? He got it. Of course, I don't tell you about that same plant there where I had another one where I really got conked.
What was that one? Also at American Rayon?
American Bamberg and North American Rayon. What happened there was they were putting in a lot of new machinery. The rayon industry was converting into making nylon too and blends and things of that kind.
40s?
This is in the latter 40s, early 50s,
Yeah.
when there's tremendous changes going on. So the company, we had a contract with the company which said that if there were changes based upon changes in machinery, changes in methods of production, changes that affected the production of employees where they had to learn new methodology, that we tried it for 30 days or 60 days, I forget now the exact thing. And if we found that it worked out, fine. If we didn't, we continued to grieve, and then it became a question whether the company had put too much load on, whether they were asking for too much or whatever it was. Okay. So we go to this arbitration. It's a big change in the spinning room. And the spinning room in that plant was, as I say, 1/4 mile long with all kinds of machines and long aisles. They're tremendous. So we go to work on it, and on a workload, the procedure that we followed was the company said, here's what it is that we think they can do. Here's our engineer who made the study, or here's our department, and they would give us the rhyme and the reason for it and how they figured out. And they would say this much was for doing this part of the operation, this much for this, so much for so-called personal time, so much for fatigue, so much for whatever else it was. And we had the right to go in there with a stopwatch. And through the ILG, where they had an engineering department, I had spent a little time with Gomberg, who headed it with them, and I got where I could use a stopwatch and a clipboard, and I'd walk in there with 2 or 3 of my people, and we'd put on the kind of a show that would convince our people that we knew what the hell we were doing. Well, we did to some extent, but we weren't that adept at it. Anyway, they get through, I put our witnesses on one after another. They get up and tell about before the end of the 8-hour shift, they're just falling down dead. They can't finish the shift. They can't sleep at night. They're so worn out, everything else. Beautiful story that they were telling, and it sounded terrible, terrible, terrible. And we prepared it and gone through with it a substantial amount. The personnel man did not do a lot of cross-examining, except that he proved that when the machines were working properly, you didn't have in the spinning room where the ends came down, and if the ends didn't come down, you didn't have to work that hard. If everything was running smoothly like the engineer said, even not quite as smooth, that the job ought to be the kind of job that you could handle. It's about noontime now. The arbitrator says, we've been talking about these new machines and spinning and yak, 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 yak. He says, I haven't seen them. Do you have any objection to my taking a look and seeing them? I turn to my people, and they shake their head. They have no objection. I said, no, we don't have any objection. Company, be glad to show them, and they'll be glad to do it during the recess. I said, well, wait a minute, when you're doing it, I said, are you sending someone from the company to show them through? Yeah. I said, then I want to accompany you too, because I don't want you propagandizing my arbitrator. And of course, the company couldn't say no, because when you put it that way. So sure enough, we get ready to go. At noontime, I turned to my boys. I said, now look, he's going to go through there. Are we sure that what we've been telling him is just like it is? Yeah. Do we have to send word ahead to make sure? Don't worry. Who am I going to rely on? Shall I finish my sad story and tell you that we went over to the plant? We go into the spinning department, and we walk in, and we're at the very far end where the long aisles are there. Look down the aisle, there's not a soul there, and we're walking down and so on. We turn into the next aisle, and we walk all the way back, and he's pointing out things. Then we turn, and I said, the man said, let's take a look at one more aisle, because there was some other kind of thread that was being run through. They were different numbers of the thread. And we start down that. We head down it. As we get about halfway down, we see there's a cluster of men way down at the end there. That's really the first ones we've seen, because that we saw an occasional one as we went, but that occasional one didn't mean anything. And as we get closer, we must have been about 300 feet away. One of them looks up at us and sees us, and they all scatter. I begin to wonder. We get a little closer, and they left the dice on the floor and the money laying on the damn floor. And we get there, and Lou Taylor, who's the personnel man, who later resigned and became an arbitrator, and we used to accept him because he was such a decent guy. We get up there, and he says to the arbitrator, this is that job that they were telling you that they couldn't make the day work because it was so damn hard. So you see, when I told you about the one that we won with the typewriter, I ought to tell you the other one. And I ought to tell you the final one, then we'll go on to something else. This same man, that company opened another plant down in Sylacauga, Alabama. And Sylacauga, Alabama was the first plant that was what we call a continual operation plant. It was one that if you put the materials into the great big vats, which was the paper puff and the chemical, the acids and all the other things, and then it started going through the process, it could follow through the process for several days until it finally hit the spinning machines. And when it hit the spinning machines, that's when you had to make sure that the ends were not coming down, but it would flow from the chemical substance. You would see it come out of the gooseneck. It was liquid, and then when it came out of the gooseneck, it was a thread. One of those little miracles, I used to call it. So originally, we tried to get the company to let us extend our contract down there, and they wouldn't let us do it. They tried to make us go through an election. So I sent one of our men down there who had worked in the American Anchor Company. He had never worked for this same company, which was then called the Bonit Company, B-E-A-U-N-I-T. And I sent him down there, and I told him to get him a job in the mechanical department because we knew they were hiring in the mechanical department to set up the machinery. And I got a hold of a millwright who belonged to the Millwrights Union out of Birmingham, and had him feed some of his people in there too, so that I knew I had good union people in there to help me organize the plant. When I knew that we had it, and we had the machinery was all set, and they were ready to go to work, and they had offered jobs to these men in the maintenance department, and I had gotten each one of them to accept it. Whether they would stay or not would be different, but they had accepted it, were being put on the payroll, and they were starting to run the stuff through. They were experimenting with it to make sure everything was running all right. And I again made a demand on the company to recognize us, and the company refused. So when they refused, we kept on for a few days until we made sure that what we had heard was correct. What we heard was that the directors of the company were coming down at a certain time, about 2 or 3 weeks off, and at that time they were going to dedicate the plant because they would have already experimented running everything through. It was running good, and they were going to have their directors meeting, stockholders meeting, show the new plant, everything else. So when I make the demand and they write me back a letter that they think we ought to go through an election, that we do not represent the people there, they ought to have a free choice to decide whether they want a union or not. So I then called them up and I said, we're going to strike your plant. Well, they didn't like that. So sure enough, we struck them. And after we struck them, why, I don't have to tell you, we closed them down. And having closed them down, they then agreed to do business with us, and we had a contract down there. And in the course of that contract, the story that I'm getting to is they fired a gal who had been working for them for some little time, and they fired her because of absenteeism. And our people were really aroused about it. Why were they aroused? She had just lost her husband. He had just died. And here they fired this woman. Her brother also had was working in the plant. In a little town like that, everybody knew everybody and so on. So we go to arbitration, and the arbitrator was a man named Harold Dworet. Harold was quite a guy. He was one of the active arbitrators here for some time.
D-U-A-R-E-T, Dworet.
D-W-O-R-E-T, Dworet. His wife is still around here. Some of our labor people still remember him because he was quite active. We go down, we have the hearing. We put her on the stand. The company, of course, puts a record in and shows that she had been absent, she had been sick, and she was absent because her husband was sick, she was absent because her children was sick. Everybody was sick, and it was a terrible record. And then they put in the worst records they have, and ours is worse than all of them. We put her on the stand, and she breaks down on the stand and tells this pitiful story about her husband, how he got sick and was in the hospital, out of the hospital, in the hospital, and finally he died. We put her brother on. Her brother verifies that all these dates and times and places that she had brought in, given the excuse that her husband died, and on and on and on. We finished with those two witnesses. I figured that's all I need. I turned to Dworet. We had an agreement with that company that when we had a discharge, that the arbitrator, we had 3 named arbitrators, that they would, off the bench or there, say, put her back to work, put him back to work, don't put him back, and then they would make the decision later on back pay, and they would write the decision up. And that way, why they would save a month maybe back pay if they were putting them back on, and it would tell our people where we were at. Put her back to work. Okay. We put her back to work, and we come on back. We wound up, I think it was on a Thursday. Monday morning, I get a call from Lou Taylor. Lou Taylor is the personnel man who handled the arbitrations.
Right.
And he says, Joe, let me read something to you. Wife arrested, poisoned husband. I said, well, what does that mean? He says, he reads me her name and says, whatever her name was, had been arrested for feeding arsenic to her husband. He says, what shall I do? I said, what do you mean, what should you do? The arbitrator said, put her back to work. He hasn't made his decision yet on back pay. But I said, if she's in jail, and he says, put her back to work, under our contract, you've got X number of days that you come back to work in. If not, why, you have to have an excuse. If it's not a good excuse, you're dead. He says, do you want to call Dworet up and tell him? I said, no, I think you better break the news to him. So he calls Dworet up, and he tells him in a few minutes why Dworet's calling me. What shall I do? I said, what do you mean, what should you do? You made your decision. You said, put her back to work. She's supposed to go back to work. That was Thursday. I think she would have been scheduled back on Monday. She's in jail. This is Monday, and she can't go to work. And I said, if she doesn't get out on bond, you don't have a problem. And I said, this is a felony and first-degree murder. I said, they're not going to set a bond for her. Anyway, make a long story short, the evidence developed that she had been feeding him arsenic. And this brother of hers was the one who had gotten it from the stores and had bought it and given it to her. And she was giving him just enough to wear him down. She finally killed him. So all I got to say is, you see, you have all kinds of things that transpire, good and bad, humorous and otherwise.
Had you ever been in Silicaga before, when it was mainly a textile town?
Oh, Silicaga originally had a big Army depot there, Childersburg, right next to it. When I said Silicaga before, I really meant Childersburg was where it was, but it's next door.
Right.
And of course, I ought to tell you, it was in Sylacauga where I had my heart attack after I had finished talking to some printers who were out on strike and whom I did not even represent, but whom I'd gone down to talk to at the request of our man who headed up the Alabama State Federation of Labor. What was his name?
Barney Weeks.
Barney Weeks. He had asked me to come down. I talked to him, and when I finished, I had this heart attack, and I went to the Comer, is the little town there, and the Comer mill people had, the hospital was there, and that's where I stayed alive. That was in '65. But Childersburg originally, and this shows you that a lot of companies don't really do the attention to what they're doing as they should. The North American Rayon and American Bamberg became Bonet. In World War I, they were put under the, we had a department that took over German-owned plants. Their plant was taken over and run by the federal government during World War I, and finally was then turned over, and then they claimed that they became a Dutch outfit and God knows what. Anyway, when they went to open this brand new plant, they originally talked about opening it up in Elizabethton. Then they figured they would have trouble if they did there, because if this is one of those fast-moving ones, and here they try to move some of the people out of the plant where they use 20 people in a department and they'll only use one, or 500 people in the department, they only use 20, it won't work. So they looked around. They need water for a rayon and a nylon plant. They need water. Just like in New England, they use water for power, so here they need water too. They found it in Childersburg, Sylacauga. But instead of looking around real carefully to take a good hard look to see what is the situation union-wise, because they were going to play with me about the union. Remember I told you they didn't want to give me a union agreement to be extended over there. There was a chemical plant, furnished chemicals to the Army. It was one of the first chemical plants that furnished chemicals to the armed forces. It had a union. Alabama has a lot of good union people there, out of the mines, the foundries, steel mills, all this other business, and the reason is because of the type of industry they had there. When they said they were going there, I knew that they had picked the wrong place. I wasn't about to tell them, and they found out that it was that way because the little chemical mill was completely organized. There was a big electrical substation there. The electrical workers had it organized. It was independent originally from the Alabama Power, and I think later on became part of the Alabama Power. There was another plant of some kind. I forget what they did there. Also all union, and they put this one up bright spanking brand new there. They didn't do their homework. And that's why we were able to do as well as we did. The sad thing about it, though, is that with the changes in the industry, that plant no longer is in existence.
In the rayon.
In the rayon and nylon industry, that plant is no longer in existence. They closed that one down. American Bamberg, North American Rayon was bought out by a gas company out of Texas. Is who still operated much reduced number of people there, where we once had 5,500. I don't know whether there's 2,000 that work there now.
For a minute I thought that once upon a time you told me a story of being in a textile town and there was an episode with a pistol and going to the county line or something like this where maybe they were after you or...
Well, wait a minute. There are 2 or 3 episodes
Okay,
in
that's cool.
Alabama.
Okay.
If you want to go back to the episode in Alabama, in Greenville, Alabama, what happened there was, and this goes back, oh shoot, early 40s at least. I think it was in the 1942 convention of the Hatters that I had just been beat up and went up there and made my famous beacon speech, that my nose was like a beacon, it shone.
Let's go to that story first and then move into the other one. We can't.
That's the, well, what happened there was this. The Hat Corporation of America in Amesbury, Massachusetts, I think is the town, had dealt with the Hatters Union for many years, had a union shop agreement. The business agent of the union there was on the town council. The owner of the plant was on the town council. Union label plant, beautiful relationship, milk and honey, respect for each other, conditions, everything. One bright day they decide to open a plant. They look around and the only place they can find one is in my native state, Alabama, in Greenville, which is down in the Black Delta, below Montgomery, below everything. We start to organize it. I get President Zariski to send Carmen Lucia down there. Carmen Lucia was originally in the Amalgamated Clothing, worked in Rochester, New York, of Italian origin, good Catholic. He sent her down here originally to help us organize Atlanta. When we started organizing that, I asked him to have her come down. He sent her. We go down there. She has signed up a number of people. We've made demand on the company to recognize us. No dice. He tries all the suasion that he can because look how long we've been getting along and look at our good relationship. On and on and on and on. Might as well talk to the wall. This is a foreign country. And the fathers in Greenville, when we went down, said that we don't like unions and we ain't gonna have a union. And they asked who should they put in charge of the plant. And they put a man in charge of the plant who was the vice president of the local bank. We go down, we organize, we have this meeting. At that time, I believe we had filed for an election. I may get some of my facts a little wrong here. But what happened was I go down with a man named Dunham, D-U-N-H-A-M, and I think his initials were G-D. He was an organizer for the AFL, and we were trying to get the AFL to help us with the drive there, for him to work with a few men that were there, and Carmen, of course, was working with the women. And they set up a meeting for us. So we go down for the meeting. The meeting is in the courthouse. When it's in the courthouse, why, we hand bill the place and a lot of people come. When we go there, why, the sheriff is there, his deputies are there, some officials from the company are there. And when I suggest to them that this is going to be a union meeting, that I think that it would be appropriate that just the people who would be involved are there, I'm told by the sheriff that this is a public place, and then any meeting that's held here, why, any citizen who is a citizen of this community has the right to be there. So we're faced then with the choice, shall we hold a meeting and do our talking with them all there or not? We decide we're gonna hold it. We ain't got nothing to hide. They want to hear, let them hear. And we carry on the usual meeting, telling what we think about the boss, what we don't, and how we've had all this good relationship for years up the line. They come down to Alabama, they think that people in Alabama don't deserve the wages that they make up in New England. People in Alabama are not part of the United States. They should be treated differently. And that we have established these kind of conditions up there. We can't tell them that we'll be put in the first contract, but if we could do it there, why can't we do it here? Are they any better than us? Of course not. We get a good reception, we have a good meeting, and of course we can see that the management folks and the sheriff and all the rest of the so-called interested citizens who they had stimulated to come were not happy with us. We wind up the meeting. Carmen says that she's going to take some of the gals home. Dunham and I are going to take some of the other people home. And I was registered in at they had a great big 3-story wooden building that was a hotel, and the railroad track came right next to it. And when I say next to it, the room that I was in was 8 or 10 feet below the track, the window. When I looked out of that window, I saw the bank that the railroad ties were on, and there was the track, and it was a live railroad track with trains coming through there. I didn't know this at the time, but I found out that night after all this happened. But anyway, we take the gals home, and Joe Jacobs likes ice cream. And there's a little ice cream parlor on the main street of the town, or a block away from where the hotel is. There's only one main street with a few stores there. And this little ice cream parlor, I figured might be open, so I say to Dunham, let's just go down there and get us some ice cream. And we did. And we got our ice cream, and we start out, and it's a narrow little place there with just a counter and stools on it, and there's a door to come in, and it's probably 10, 15 feet wide with a counter there. He steps out ahead of me, and they grab him. They grab him, and they start beating on him, and I'm right behind him, and I can't back up because there's a screen door that's already coming behind me, and I step out, and they grab me. And you talk about taking a beating, we took it. Now, I say we took it. We tried to fight, and I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, help, help, help. And I'm swinging, and they're whanging me. They banged me in the nose. They shoved me on the sidewalk. They stomped on me, tore the knees out of a suit that I had. I had a high-priced pen for that time. It went flying out of my pocket. I lost it that. Anyway, they bang on us and tell us, get the hell out of town if you know what's good for you. They don't have to tell me why they're doing it. And there's 6 of them. They jump in this car, and no light on it. It's dark, and it's dark there. I can't tell any license, anything else. And out of the corner of my eye, I see what it looks like the police chief standing across the street, 100 feet down. So as they're backing away, I run over there, and sure enough, that's him. I said, did you see him? Did you see him? See what? I said, didn't you see them jump on us and beat us up? You mean, he says, that I would stand here and let somebody beat you up and I wouldn't do anything about it? Well, says I to myself, says I got the wrong guy here. I didn't say anything more. Meantime, I had started walking back. Dunham was still laying down where they really whanged him. He was an older man than I was at the time, and they'd done a pretty good job on him, and he was there was a big curb on from the sidewalk, and he was sitting there brushing himself off, and okay, let's us go and over to the hotel, and we go to the hotel, and meantime my nose is begun to swell up, and I got a black eye, and you get scuffled up pretty good. They didn't break any bones or anything else. So we decide that we're going to make a report of it the following morning. And we go to the courthouse, and I go to the sheriff's office, and we make the report. And they just can't hardly believe it that anything like that would happen in Greenville, And I said, I think that we can identify some of these people that did it, because we saw a couple of them at our meeting. Who were they? Well, I said, I don't know who they were, but we'll recognize them. Anyway, we pursued it to the extent that we got a hold of the district attorney down there, county attorney who's supposed to prosecute this, asked him if he would present it to the grand jury. We never got it to the grand jury. They kept insisting that we had to tell them the names of these people. We recognized at least one in the crowd there, and that one in the crowd was somebody who did business with the company. I don't forget now whether he was an insurance man or whatever it was, but a local townsman. I think he was a real estate man. We didn't know his name then, but we could identify him by name. They would never let us appear before a grand jury. They would never do a damn thing about it. The convention of the Hatters came up right after that, and I've got the proceedings of it here. And I was called on to talk, and of course I did what I call my famous beacon speech about my nose was like a beacon. It was trying to show the way for these people to organize here. And then when I get through, Wyzeritsky makes one of his fire and thunder speeches that they will support us, that they will back us up, that the union will win, and on and on and on. That incident and that campaign resulted in us putting the man who was then the director of the National Labor Relations Board on the stand. The only time in my career that I know that a board agent, the man in charge of the office, took the stand and was a witness, because by and large they will not be witnesses. And I've got his picture, and I'm trying to remember his name. I've got it around here somewhere. And because I took a picture of it, and we then had a report of it in the Hatters paper that they put out, a monthly paper. And the story is that eventually, after one election, another election, we finally got certified. And when we got certified, we got a contract. And we had a contract for about a year, and the company folded the plant. Thousands of dollars spent on it. Thousands. Folded the plant. Kept that plant up the line. It no longer is in existence. It's since gone out of existence because the Hatters Industries, went to hell. But that's exactly what happened there. That's my story about Greenville. The other one was in Aliceville, in a textile plant.
Where's Aliceville?
Aliceville is on the other side of Reform, Alabama, close to the borderline of where Columbus, Mississippi is. What happened there was that plant, well, let's back up. In Tuscaloosa, Alabama was a good rubber union.
Firestone plant.
That's right. I knew some of those people. I used to go over to the state federation meetings and talk about the union label, and I would give them chances on hats and caps, and we'd give them away, you know, and they used to love to see me over there. I would talk about the union label and made a humorous thing out of a serious problem, and they used to enjoy having me come, because among the things that I would tell them was that the guys that bald-headed, non-union barber, what do you expect? The gals, the ones with nice shapes, they wear the union bras, they wear the union dresses, the shapes fit right. The gals that are bow-legged, non-union hose, what do you expect? Non-union shoes, you know, I'd mix it with that kind of thing, and then wind up it's your union dollar. If you can spend it for union goods, what you're doing is you're helping your union and every other union. If you don't, what you're doing is cutting your own throat. If I gave you a raise and told you to cut your throat, you'd look at me like I was crazy. When I say spend your union dollars for union goods and you don't do it, you're doing the same thing, but it isn't the same sharp razor in front of you. Anyway, they got to know me in that end of the country. And in Reform, Alabama, there was an IBEW plant that made light bulbs for GE, I think it was at the time. And down comes a cap manufacturer from Detroit, Wolverine Cap Company. RECHTMAN. His son lives in Atlanta now. His son is quite active as a radical was active as a radical on the campus at Emory and in the Democratic Party, and on and on and on and on.
Is there a daughter, Janet Reckman?
Probably is. I don't know the daughter. All right. But anyway, we organized that plant for the cap makers, and then organize them through the electrical workers who say that these people have been talking to them about joining a union. I'm down there in Aliceville. Aliceville is just beyond Reform, a little further down the road, trying to organize the plant down there, because there was some talk that that plant was being sold to the Dan River mills, and we had contracts with Dan River all the way up in Virginia, and we figured if they're getting ready to sell it, it must be because work conditions are bad, machinery is bad, and they want to unload somewhere instead of fixing it up. So we go down there to hand bill. We hand bill the thing. The first hand bill, nothing happens. I have some of our people, I think it was 3 of them, go in another time. They start hand billing. When they do, a squad comes running out with these sticks that they use on the weave machines. It's bigger at that end and tapers off as it gets down to the bottom of the end. It must be about 3.5, 4 feet big. They come down there and they start swinging on these guys and take the handbills away from them, and my guys run. Next I hear, well, I have a phone call saying that they've been run away. One of them was a young fella named Kelly that I had working with us in New Orleans, and he came out of Chicago originally. Oh, he must have weighed 125 pounds, dripping wet, stood about 5'3" or 4". The only significant thing about him beyond that was that he knew every priest everywhere that we went, and that particularly those who drank. He used to love to drink, and they used to drink with him. I saw more priests drinking than I could believe. But be that as it is, call me up and they tell me what's happened. I said, well, we got to go back. Oh, we don't want to go back. I said, well, if we go back, we ain't gonna go back just 3 people. So what I did was I got in touch with the building trades in Demopolis. Demopolis, of all places, had a substantial building trade. Alabama is that way. There are some spots that are particularly good. Demopolis always was a good spot. And because there were industry around, they would work in the industrial places. They never worked in textile plants because textile plants were always notoriously non-union. I get in touch with them and I ask them if they can arrange to meet us over there on a certain date. They can. I pull the whole staff that I can get of textiles. I get our friends up at the GE plant in Reform to send us some people. I get the Cap plant to send us some people. I get Tuscaloosa, the rubber plant, to send us a few people. Time we get through, we 50, 75 people. I arranged for them to meet me at a place just outside of town. And we got handbills. And the plan we laid out was, what we're going to do is that we will go over to the plant. We'll have the same 3 guys handbilling. The way the plant was situated, it faced onto a street that ran parallel to the plant. And then there was a street that came perpendicular, and it was a short street. And then there was another street that ran parallel to the plant, which was 200 feet away. So when we would go there, we would come up the street out of sight of the plant on the second street. Everybody would park and get out. 3 people would go. I would come out just about the time the shift change took place. I carried a bush camera with me all the time, one of those square cameras that I used to take pictures for our house organ. And I would come around about that time. And then if they jumped on us, these other guys would come swarming around there. Every one of them was wearing a hard hat. and everyone had a piece of 2x4 or some piece of whatever it was. So we meet, we get our instructions. I said, now we're going to go by and see the sheriff. I figure 2 things will happen. Number 1, he won't want to help us at all, nor will he help us. Number 2, he'll tip the plant off that we're coming. But when we go see the sheriff, I go in only with my 3 guys. I don't bring the whole crew in. So I do. I go in, I see him, and tell him who I am. I'm a lawyer. I also working with the textile union, and we go handbill. And we have the right under the law to handbill, and I give him a 2-page letter, which starting with the Hague case up in New Jersey, where they were the first case where they said that you could hold public meetings and you could handbill and things like that. I can't guarantee you that I'll take care of you or that I'll protect you. I said, not asking you to. All we're doing is telling you we're exercising our rights as American citizens. We're going to go handbill. If anybody tries to stop us from doing it, we'll protect ourselves. If they leave us alone, all we want to do is handbill, and we'll be back again to handbill some more. Sure enough, we go over there. We start handbilling. They start filtering out at the change as the before the filter out. A few of them start coming in. We give them the handbills as they go in. We figure that'll tell the people inside that we're out handbilling, and then the bosses will soon see it. Sure enough, we hear the alarm or the bell ring, at the change of the shift, and they start coming out. Lord, it should be. We're outside of the plant. I'm there with the 3 men are there first. We are downstairs. A few people start coming in. We give them handbills. When we give them handbills, we know they'll take it inside and they'll know that we're out there.
I have come around by that time, and I have this bush camera, which is a square camera that we used to take photographs for our house organ. The bell rings, the shift starts to pour out. As we look up the stairwell, which is right there opposite the entrance of the gate, we see them starting to come down with the big sticks in their hand, and these sticks, of course, are the ones that I described where they're 3 or 4 inches at one wide at one end, and then taper off to the bottom end. They run 3.5, 4 feet long. They're heading down the stairs, and just about the time that they're about to hit the downstairs part where I have this whistle, which is a policeman's whistle. And I blow it, and when I blow it, these guys swing around the corner with their hard hats and with these clubs in their hand, and they're running just like it's an Olympic race. They're anxious to see who's the first one to get there. And they just about get there as these people walk out of the door on the front. As I've seen these cartoons where people are put on the brakes in a hurry and they dig the heels into the ground, and you see the mud fly, or the dirt flash around, and here our boys are there, and they just urging them on, come on, come on, come on. Why, when there are 3 of them there, why, you're big heroes, but when we're around and you don't want to come on, let's stop us. In the meantime, people are coming out, and we're handing them handbills, and these people who have come out of the mill, who are the goon squad, as we call them, they're telling them, don't take them, and we're yelling back at them, take them. They don't want you to read them. They want you to be just like a nigger. They want you to be in slavery. They don't want you to know what's going on. They're afraid to let you see what the union can do for you. They want to be the big boss, and they want to keep you in slavery. And then one of the guys somewhere got a hold of a clipboard or something, and he's starting like he's writing the names down of the ones as they're walking out and getting the handbills from us. And we handbilled. We finished handbilling. I didn't tell you that about the time that we were ready to leave and everything had quieted down, and we was just standing around, you know, kidding each other about how we scared the hell out of these guys. The sheriff rides by in his car, you know, just slow riding by and turns, doesn't stop, doesn't say anything, nothing, keeps on going. And we go on back, and of course, I had arranged that we would go down the road, and we did. We went down the road to an eating place, and we stopped down there and got us some coffee, and we're kidding about the thing. And then later on, while we handbilled again, we didn't have any problem with it. The second time, I had more than just the 3. I had another group of our own people out of Reform. We had a double shift up there, so I had some of them come down. I had some more of them come down from the GE Bull plant that they had up there. We did not succeed in organizing them at that time. It was a number of years later, after the Dan River people had taken over the plant, that we finally were able to organize it. But that's another
Alabama story.
Yeah, I could tell you.
You were in Decatur, Alabama at some point. Wasn't there a local in Decatur?
Oh yes, Decatur, Alabama. We had organized the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company 3 textile plants. One of them in Rockmart, one of them in Atco, and one of them in Decatur. And Decatur was the last one to organize. And of course, the Decatur plant was where they had some real problems organizing a plant. Somehow the name Wolverine again is in my mind, but I don't remember if that's the one, but it was a plant that was tied in with the Detroit industry that they settled down there, and they never could organize it. But we organized a flour plant there, Flour, right on the river there, where they brought the stuff down in the barge and they processed the grain, and then shipped it from there, and it was part of a big Minnesota grain company. I forget the exact name now.
Pillsbury or?
No, it wasn't Pillsbury.
It was one of the Minnesota grain.
One of the big grain companies up there. And what happened there was, it was about 50-50 black and white.
This is at the flour plant.
At the flour plant. They knew that we were organizing the textile plant. They sent over 2 or 3 times asking us to help them organize. And each time I tried to get a hold of Flour and Grain International, which is a very little international union and that really doesn't have any staff or anything else, and never could get them to do anything. Finally, I remember one bright day, the president of the local that we had over at the tire and rubber plant called me up and said, look, we got to either do something or not do something. I said, have we got any membership cards there? He said, yeah. I said, give it to them. We'll take them in the union. Let's see if they really mean it or not. I figured, you know, sure enough, that's the same way I did with the cap plant over in Reform, Alabama. When I first went over there and they started talking, they wanted a union and so on and so on. I figured, well, if they do, give them cards, and if they sign them, fine. This one man, I never will forget, he said, give me 50 of them. And there wasn't quite 100 people, if that many, in the cap plant. So I figured, okay, we'll give them to him, see what he's going to do. That was I was there for a meeting on a Saturday. On Monday, I get a call that evening. He got all of them signed. He didn't have enough cards. That's how we started with the Reform Alabama plant. But anyway, we did the same thing with this plant. We won an election. When we win an election, we start to set up a union. And they start talking to me about, well, we're going to have a black union, we're going to have a white union. I said, I said, our local over in the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company is one union. And I said, that's the only way we're going to operate it.
Was that a Goodyear Textile plant? There was a Goodyear Textile plant.
Yeah, Goodyear Textile. It's not a rubber one.
Yeah, right.
Not a rubber. The rubber was the rubber workers. And they had that in Gadsden,
Right.
and they had a couple, one other, I think, maybe in Anderson. But in any of the textile mills, and that leads me to a story in South Carolina where we had another black and white thing. But anyway, I said, we're going to have one union. Yeah, but I said, ain't no but. Not only that, but if you elect a black president, then the vice president will be white. If you elect a black secretary, then the treasurer is going to be white, or vice versa. I said, in that way, I will make sure that everybody is represented.
This is early 40s or when?
This is before any 65 decision or any other decision, anything else like that, where it was the way we operated.
I'm just trying to get, it's like
That's right.
40s though.
It would be in the latter 40s or early 50s, no later than the middle 50s at the most. And sure enough, we did. We won it. We set it up. The first president was white. The vice president was black. I forget now whether I think the secretary was white, the treasurer was black.
So the UMW used to do that.
And the committees were integrated committees, and we never had any problem. They operated that way, and as far as I know, we still operate that way. One other incident with respect to it, I got a call after the local was in existence for some time, and the man who called me up was the then president of it. He said, they fired so-and-so. Well, so-and-so was a black, and I don't remember now whether he was an officer then or a steward. He says, and they won't put him back to work. He's gone. And he says, means we got to arbitrate it, but we ain't got no money. I said, well, I don't know about that. This was after I had left the textile Workers. I stopped working with them on an almost full-time basis nearly in 57, 58, something like it. And the reason he called me then was that he had talked to the international representative, and he couldn't get him to handle the case. I said, why wouldn't he handle it? Well, he says he doesn't think we can win it. I said, do you think we can win it? He said, yeah. I said, then why shouldn't we take it to arbitration? Well, we ain't got any money. I said, well, look, I don't know how much time it's going to take. I don't know how much it's going to cost. But I said, if you can pay me $5 a month, we're going to handle arbitration. The union's not supposed to not represent its people. He said it'll take a long time. I said, well, I figure it will if that's all you can afford. He said, let me talk to my executive committee. A couple of days later, he calls me up. He said, we'd like for you to come. I said, okay, now let's do this. In order to make sure that we hold the expense down, let me first call up the international, the textile, and talk to him. I called him up, talked to him. He said, no, he says, this fella has got the record that ain't the best, yak, 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 yak. He said, I don't think we can win it. I said, don't you even want to try? He said, I just don't think we can win it, and I've already told him that much. He said, well, if I turn up handling it for him, I said, I don't want you to get mad. Oh, you won't get mad? Okay. But sure enough, I get back in touch with these men, and I said, in order to make sure that we can handle it with the least expense, what I'll do is we'll try and set this thing on a Monday. I'll come in on a Sunday. We'll spend the whole day on Sunday. Then you'll only owe me for one day on Monday, because Sunday I normally would not be at work. We'll try and arrange it. Anyway, we arranged it. We tried it. We won it. We got the man put back on the job with back pay. He then wanted to take out of his back pay and pay me. I said, the union is supposed to see that you get what you're entitled to. And what you were entitled to, according to the arbitrator, was your back pay, and you were entitled to be put on your job. They put you on your job, the union's got to pay it. I forget how long it took. I mean, it must have been 2-3 years till they finally paid me off. Later on, they asked me to come over there and make a meeting. I went over there, and they had a little supper meeting there with the membership and everything, and pat me on the back and everything else. And then I found out that the last X dollars, I forget now whether it was $50, $25, something like that, that this man insisted that he put it in the pot to pay me, because if it hadn't been for the union and for me, he wouldn't be on the job.
Wow.
That tells you. And this is why you like unions, and this is why you like to work with people like that. But that leads to another story about black and white.
South Carolina.
Okay. In South Carolina, in the U.S. Rubber Company, also a textile mill.
Where?
Winsboro, South Carolina, of all places. Winsboro, the first time I ever rode into Winsboro, they had one cafe with a single counter there, and they had a hot plate back there. I remember taking one look at it, and I said, I'll never eat anything that came off that plate. So what my meal there was, a couple of ripe tomatoes that they had sitting on the counter, and they had a toaster there, and they got them to put a couple of pieces of toast
safe.
That I figured it can't kill me. There wasn't a restaurant in the town. The only place in the town was that the company had a clubhouse. And I wasn't about to go to the company's clubhouse, number one. Number two, I don't know that they would have let me go in there to begin with. Anyway, in there we had a local, I think it was 1100, which was the maintenance and production local, and a local 13, which was the black local.
Yard men, people at the front of the...
These are people on the front end of the line and the back end of the line. These are men in the yard. These are men who are in the receiving department who bringing in these great big bales off of the trucks and then throwing them in where they begin to be
Carted.
roving, carting, all the other business of the thing. And the shipping as it goes out. There's about 100 of them, give or take.
Big.
There's about 1,400 of the rest.
It's a big place.
It's a big place. And when I start working with the textile, I find we got two local unions. And this again, this is in the latter 40s now. And I say, we can't have it that way. Well, but they also participate on the bargaining committee.
It's going. It's going.
Is it?
Yep, I'm
Yeah.
working.
And the bargaining committee, they have one member on, and then there's 8 or 9 from the different departments. Each department has one. They may have had 2, I don't remember. I think it was just 1, though, because the shipping department guys were also the receiving department guys. You know, they shifted back and forth. Anyway, and I said, we got to have it different. So they say, no, we don't want to change it. I said, well, according to the International and its Constitution, everybody belongs to one union. We're an industrial union. We from wall to wall. I arranged a meeting with the executive committee. I figure I've got to sell them first. And here I'm coming in, band spanking new. I don't know what reception I'm going to get. So I talked with them. They said, no, we've been doing it like this for a while, and we want to keep on doing it, and everybody is happy, everybody is satisfied, you know, this kind of bull. So I said, well, we got to make the change. But since I talked to this executive committee, I want to talk to the executive committee of Local 13. So, this big local meets in the schoolhouse once a month. Local 13 meets in a different black church once a month. So I go to the meeting of the black church. We start off with a prayer. We start off with singing. We start off with the union president calling the meeting to order and having the preacher give another prayer, and then he gives him a check for $25 as a donation for using the church this time, and thanks him for it. And in the meantime, he announces, and in keeping with our schedule, or according to our schedule, our next meeting is at Brother So-and-so's church, which will be next month, and everybody knows where. They go through their business, and then they let me talk. And I tell them we're supposed to have one local union, everybody get together and belong to the same local. And when I get through, the president says, Brother Jacobs, he said, now, we don't want to be in the union. We've been in our union, we've been getting along all right. We just don't like it. So I said, why? Well, we just don't like it. And he's backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards, and I cannot get him to tell me why he doesn't like it. Finally, the man who is the secretary gets up and said, I'll tell you why. He says, we're about 100 people. They're 1,100. When there's a convention, they ain't gonna elect one of us a delegate. They're gonna elect the white people delegates. We ain't gonna be able to go to a convention. They won't see us. They won't know we're even living. But that ain't all. We meet each month in a different church. And then these are the exact words. We are big niggers around here. We give each one of them $25 every time we meet with them. If it wasn't for us, maybe some of these churches couldn't exist. Some of us belong to some of these churches. But when we have meetings there, they know we're there, and they come. Not only that, but he says if we have a strike, ain't no nigger gonna cross our picket line. Those are exact words. You know, now you don't use nigger. Then they just,
Right.
that was it.
Right.
When they have a meeting of the bargaining committee, we have one man on there. He takes care of us. They listen to it. So far, every time they've got an increase, we got an increase. Every time they got some other thing, insurance, pension, whatever, we got it too. We're on the committee. Our man will see that we get it. So far, they've been giving it to us too. We get along all right. Why? Why should we give up our union? We're bosses here. When we run our meeting, we run our meeting.
Right.
He says, they don't run it for us. We run it. Now, of course, he says we may not run it as good as some people want us to do, but he says we get along. We get along. And he goes on this whole line. And when he finishes saying it, some of the others who were laid back, they ain't scared anymore. So they speak up. And I listen to it. I said, that still doesn't make this thing equal. I said, maybe we can work out some way where we can still maintain like a division, something. I said, I don't know. Offhand, I can't tell you because I didn't expect to be greeted with this. One of them speaks up and says, it's going to have to be mighty good if you want us to change. Anyway, we get through. I've arranged to go back to meet with the executive committee of the white group because I figured that if I can get the black group to go, then I got a halfway step. I'll see if I can get the white group. I go back to them and tell them, no. But I said, we still have to do it in some fashion, somehow, some way, in order to live up to the Constitution of the International, which says that our union shall be one union in a plant. They don't buy it. Make a long story short, I guess it must have been over a period of 2 years, maybe 3 years. I kept talking to them. I came up with a plan of calling it 1300A and 1300B. Flip a coin, decide if the white one is going to be A or the white one's going to be B or the black one's going to be whatever it is. I'll let the two of you flip it and decide. Doesn't make any difference. maintain separate treasuries. Each one of you will sign and double sign checks. The only difference is that when the white so-called local will sign a check, it has the black signatures on it. When the black one signs, the white signatures on it. I'm trying to work out a scheme, some way, somehow to do this damn thing. I get nowhere. Get nowhere. We then have a strike in Winsboro. We have a strike. We talk to the executive committee, which by then, that's the bargaining committee,
Right.
and that's got a black representative with the white. So I say, we got to call a meeting of both locals. And for the first time, we have a meeting in the stew. And I look, and all my black representatives are sitting looking way back there and back. Anyway, we decide to strike. We strike. I asked the executive committees of both locals and officers to meet with me after the regular meeting. We said to set up the picket lines, captains, everything else like that, then have the people all report to work the following morning. As they go into work there, go man the picket line. Sure enough, we set that up. While we're talking, so the people who are running the black local say, don't worry about us. Ain't nobody going to work. Nobody. We don't go see the preachers. When we leave here, we go see the preachers. They'll see to it. And they were right. They were right. We did not have a single black scab. Not a single one. We had some whites that tried to scab on us, particularly those who had a kin person who was kin to the boss or something like that,
Right.
you know.
Cousin or whatever.
Yeah. Or who was currying favor.
Right.
We put up the picket lines. They stood. It stood real strong, no problem. When we finally settled the thing. So I'm talking to the committee because I know I'm going to be faced with the question of signing a contract with each local union again, with the local 1100 and local 13. So I get the white executive committee to meet with me. I said, look, will you people go with me on this division business of the A and B and so on? They were all enthused then, you know, they all excited. We just won the strike and getting a good contract and so on. Well, they ain't happy about it, but if the other one will do it, they'll do it. So I meet with the other group. And I said, this is the example. When you went to the picket line, all of you were there. One group. Now why can't we do it in the way that we operate? Anyway, make a long story short, I told them then that the executive committee of the big local said okay, and they would work out any kind of a basis that would satisfy local 13. And we did. I got them to agree, and we then had the local 1100 and the local 13 became, they didn't want to be 1100.
Right.
So they said, okay, we'll be 13B or 13A.
Right.
I forget now which one we gave them, but they retained their 13.
The black.
That's right.
identity.
And from then on, they met together. The committees were together. We worked it out so that in order to go to the convention, instead of picking delegates at large, we tried to pick them by department. By department was the way that we were able to take care of them. And if I remember correctly, they got a second delegate. because by that time, why, we had separated the departments so that the receiving and the shipping was two instead of just being one with it. They could interchange seniority, but it worked out that way. There's another example of what you can do if you want to do it, if you follow me. If you don't want to do it, so you separate the races, you separate the people. Just like after World War II, we had problems where women were being fired who had been hired into plants when they were slack on men. I remember the sales built more bleachers.
Where's that?
Just outside of Asheville, North Carolina.
Okay, Biltmore.
You know where the Biltmore is. And we had a big arbitration case there on the question of women being fired. In one fell swoop, that company turned around and, I don't know, now it was 20 or 30 women got fired. Those 20 or 30 women had worked in jobs which in days past were called the women's jobs, you know. And they would not bid out for whatever reasons. Of course, they figured it's a man's job or it's hard work or whatever it is. In the wartime, they took them all over.
Right.
And there were more women running anything than anything else. I can't remember the arbitrator's name, but he was an old man. And I had had some cases with him before, and I had remembered that when we got to talking about different things, he pulled out the picture of his grandchildren. He had 2 or 3 grandchildren, was bragging on them, you know, and all this other business. So when we went to arbitrate the question of whether they should be let out or not let out, under the contract, we took the position that while the men who came back were entitled to go back on their own jobs, that did not say, though, that when they came back, if that job had been abolished, or if they did not come back, all of those that wanted it, that new people could come in and take the job of these women. So we get together to prepare our witnesses and go over it with them, and I decide that I'm going to put on, there was a gray-haired lady, real nice-looking, one of these motherly types, you know, and makes a good impression. You never get the idea that she would hurt a fly and that sort of thing. And who has grandchildren, and I tell her, bring the pictures. And at the first opportunity, when I leave with an opening, why, you pull the pictures out and let's see where we go. And sure enough, that's what we do. We go to the hearing, we start it off, put her on the company makes its opening remarks about how they are replacing now. They've made some changes in their methodology, or their changes maybe in some equipment, and for that reason that they want these new people to be trained for it, and these folks that, it's true they've worked on it, but they've never worked on this exact thing, and they haven't done this exact machine, and on, you know, to justify their reasons. They get through with that, and we open up our statement by saying that these women have worked years, and they got seniority, and they were loyal during the wartime, and, you know, I'm waving the flag around and everything else. I can be patriotic too, you know. Then I put this lady on. Put her on, name, address, what kind of work she does, how long have you been in the plant? 20-some years. You don't look that old. Oh, she says, what do you mean? I've got grandchildren. She pulls these pictures out. And the next thing you know, he's got his pictures out. We're off to the races. Right? And from that time on, every woman, I never will forget when we adjourned for lunch, and we just put a couple of witnesses so on while the company man, the lawyer that was representing the company, now I think he came from the Blakely and Alexander crowd over there in Charlotte, who were real bastards in that industry. Man, we used to have trouble with them all the time. he comes over to me and says, I never saw so goddamn many pictures in my life. Because we're out there, showing. I don't have to tell you the remainder of it. The remainder of it is we won the arbitration. He looked their seniority. You see, we had departmental seniority and plant-wide seniority, and they tried to claim they might have plant-wide seniority, but the departmental seniority did not apply because they were going to set up a new department with new machinery here where they could and so on. We took the position that during the wartime, we just about scrapped it all. These people that stayed with the company and were entitled to stay. Yeah.
It's no papers down there, Joe.
You know Si Goffman.
I've met
Met before.
Cliff Coon.
Millie Bike.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a hell of a way to give me a newspaper.
Yeah, I wish I
Why
could.
didn't you even get me change?
They're closed.
But that's not the only place in town you
No, I
can
didn't know
get change.
you wanted to change.